In the Bronx, there's this photo. It was taken in the middle of the city, two people dancing like the world has briefly stepped out of the way. No stage, no audience, just a moment, memory, and connection. The buildings fade into the background, the street becomes their dance floor, and time seems slow. The photo was taken by David Gonzalez, and I had the opportunity to interview him and talk to him about documenting the Bronx for over 40 years. All
Cool.
right, let's start by introducing yourself.
My name is David Gonzalez. I'm a photographer and a journalist, retired from the New York Times, former Lens Blog co-editor, former Caribbean and Central America bureau chief, former About New York columnist, and a couple other things. Before that, I was at Newsweek magazine for 7 years.
So definitely the repertoire is there, the accolades are there, and you've been documenting the South Bronx for well over 30 years, 40 years now. Is that correct?
40, 47, give or take a couple of
47
years.
years. You know, when I first came across your photo, the photo of the two individuals dancing,
Yeah,
I
yeah.
was I was an artist, right? And I drew it. I drew the photos. I was so enamored by
I
it
remember
because
when you did that, by the
yeah,
way.
that was years ago.
I know. Well, I'm 68, B, so But I remember when
um,
you did that. I was telling my boy Ricky about that earlier today, Ricky Flores.
Ricky Flores, man, that's the homie. I love Ricky, man. I love
That's my man.
all the Puerto Rican photographers. I used to do photography myself, but
Mhm.
the reason I was so enamored by it is because they look like they were two Afro Puerto Ricans, right? They were two Puerto Ricans that looked like me. They represented me. And were
Yep.
you when you took when you took that photo, were you thinking about representation or were you just, focused on the moment? What was going through your head when you
I
saw those two
mean,
people dancing?
it's like I grew up in the South Bronx, so it's like, is a fish conscious of water when it's swimming in it? I mean, it's where I grew up. I mean, I was literally born 2 blocks from where I took that picture, where the Segundo Ruiz Bulvis Clinic is now. That used to be St. Francis Hospital, yo. I was born there. Um, I photographed the world around me, and I spent a lot of time in the South Bronx, still do. Um, and so I just photographed people. The real driving force from behind that really was more my desire to be a street photographer. I was really into street photography when I got to Yale. And that's really what I practice. And to this day, that's a fair chunk of what I do. There's also, a good amount of documentary work. That dancer's picture was kind of a combination of both documentary and just what I would do on the street. But was I conscious of it? No.
No.
And in fact, I took that picture on August 10th, 1979, and I didn't see it again until about March of 2009. I didn't even know that picture existed until March 2009. I have other pictures from that day. There was one that I had printed up in my house for decades, same day. It was only until 2009 when I started scanning my negs that I was like, and that's when I realized, I had a bunch of stuff. And really the way that came to light was, my editor at the time, Joe Sexton, who's since left the Times, Joey was like, hey, why don't we do a piece on the bad old days? The black and white photography from the 70s, mostly the late 70s in the South Bronx and other parts of the Bronx too, like Fordham Road and whatnot. And that's really when I started, like, I remember I locked myself in an office that back then we had the Bronx office of the Times at Fordham Plaza, a location that I chose back in the late 90s, to be honest. Um, and then, I just locked myself up with a scanner and went through stuff, and that's when I discovered that. And I continue to scan my old negatives. This is like Ricky does. All of us are at that point where we do that. You just see things differently when you get older, man. I mean,
Yeah.
I was not on the ball enough back then for whatever reason to realize what that picture was.
Right.
As I got older and had more experience as both a writer and a photographer, that bad boy jumped out at me the minute I saw the contact sheet.
Right. Right. Does it have new meaning? And what does it mean to you now? Especially in the current climate where we have so many Afro-Latino voices that are trying to find their place within the diaspora. What does it mean to you now?
I think, whether one is, you know, Afro-Latino, Afro-Boricua, uh, Neo-Rican, whatever. I mean, I think you have to be true to yourself. And that's the only thing you can be good at is being you.
Right.
I mean, you got to understand what other people have done and what other photographers have done, maybe, but only you can find out how you express yourself. And I've always seen these things as major determinants of my worldview. I mean, I'm the child of Puerto Rican migrants who came to this city in the 1930s when they were teenagers to work in factories, yo.
Hmm.
My mother and father met at La Milagrosa Church in Harlem, got married there, and then like all good Ricans moved to the Bronx when we were born.
Very good.
Working class Rican family surrounded by Boricuas, growing up at a time when the Bronx started burning, so we moved a lot. I went to Catholic schools with a whole bunch of different kids, except we all were most likely the first in our family to go to high school, and all our parents worked at their hands, and that included the white boys. I mean,
Yeah.
there's some down white boys at Cardinal Hayes back in the day. I'm still in touch with them. All those things shaped my worldview, and it's a very distinctive worldview, especially as I got older and got good at this thing, both in writing and in photography, that reflects what I believe are the more important things about our communities. I don't need somebody to jump in from the outside and tell me that things are messed up.
Right.
I don't need Stephen Shames to come and do a book on the Bronx Boys with a cover photograph of a kid jumping between two rooftops. And it's like two things. One, do you have consent to take that picture? Because the homeboy's underage, okay? Well, I guess you don't need consent to take pictures of brown and black kids harming themselves. And the other thing is, as Ricky pointed out, one of his best friends died doing just that, jumping. And so here comes Stephen Shames, who's like big time photographer who has a reputation for photographing the Black Panthers. I don't care what he did with the Panthers. I know what he did in the Bronx, and I've told them, just like with Bruce Davidson, the guy who did East 101st Street. I said, my Bible is Frank Espada. Frank walked those same streets, photographed those same people. And I'll tell you right now, there's not a single person looking messed up, not a single kid in their underwear standing in garbage, none of that stuff. I also told Bruce, Bruce once, we got into it once, and he kept on saying, "Oh, I respect you. I want to show you East Harlem." I'm like, dude, my folks met at La Milagrosa, and I used to cop weed on East 101st Street. You ain't going to show me anything. You're just not. And these people have this assumption that somehow, because they are part of the photographic canon, that their work is sacrosanct. And when it comes to my generation of photographers, whether it's Joe Rodriguez, Max Golong, George Malave, or Ricky, me, Angel Franco has two Pulitzers, by the way, Conzo, who everybody knows, Edwin, who's a documentarian, we roll deep. And we don't need somebody from the outside to come in and tell us things were messed up. We know they were messed up. Would you like to discuss with us how they got messed up? They're not ready for that discussion because they'd rather just show dysfunctional Ricans and claim that they are compassionate rather than to look at their own privilege and their own role in perpetuating this image. I like to show images of our people just being, just being. Nothing
Right.
special. We don't go out and celebrate people and stuff like that, like, all these little DEI kumbaya parties and whatnot. I mean, we don't. I mean, when they talk, I see these things like today we celebrate, and I'm like, yo, unless there's a Valencia cake involved, that don't count as a celebration in my book, first of all. But also, it's like, you know, there's a lot of stuff out there.
Right.
And what we try to do is just be ourselves and chronicle the entire community. We don't shy away from the rough stuff. I may not do that, but Franco has definitely done that. Edwin has definitely done that. As a collective, there are eight of us now. We come with different perspectives, and we don't expect one single person to tell the story of the Bronx. It's a longitudinal study with a lot of different people in it. And I think there's a lack of knowledge about that out there because again, with my generation, because we had to come up when the canon was these big guys. And then, we're being told that our style of photography is passe. I remember in 83, Alex Coleman, the wife of the critic A.D. Coleman and a gallerist, we were at a house at a salon, right? And we are all excited. And she's like decreeing that street photography is dead. And I look at my boy Lewis, ain't that a trip, right? When a bunch of Ricans are getting into it, they declare it dead.
Hmm.
The fact of the matter is, I don't care about any of that stuff. I
Right.
care about being me. And I think the advice I'll give to anybody, shoot the world around you, find somebody you trust that you can show your pictures to, and learn about other people. But ultimately, you can only be yourself
Right.
and you can only reflect your own concerns. But you have to think about it too. I mean, the best photographers think about stuff. I mean, I'm not, maybe it's because I came up in the journalistic side. So I always worked with photographers who knew what was up
Right.
because they were covering the same exact thing I was doing. When you're getting into like the art world, it's a different deal, a different vibe,
It is.
but you do need somebody that you can trust.
Absolutely. Now, your work spans a very specific period in the Bronx, which was the time where the Bronx was literally and metaphorically burning,
Hmm.
right? And this
Yeah,
was several decades which you covered not only the physical but also the socio-political change
yeah.
of the Bronx. How do you balance the impulse to document historical truth with the need to honor individual dignity and agency in your subjects?
I think you tell the story through the eyes of the actors. I learned that in graduate school from my advisor. And it was like, you want to give them living, breathing people that people can identify with. And you want to give these people their measure of respect. It's very easy to portray people who are down and out in very dramatic ways to tug at heartstrings. But ultimately, that hurts the people you're supposedly trying to help. All it does is it reinforces stereotypes of powerlessness and what have you. When in fact, we're not a minority, we're the majority, as my friend Shahidul Alam, the Bangladeshi photographer and activist, says. Shahidul always talks about the majority world. Well, that's your world and my world, B. you know, and it's the world that we share with Shahidul and all these other people. And I think that's really what we have to remember, because to be honest, again, my generation had to deal with that. And then, like, there's a whole bunch of new jacks that came out in the last 10 years. And I'm going to be honest, I see, and I mean, there's some really good young people out there shooting, like Destiny Mata, Roy Bazin. They're solid. They're real solid. You know, we got Abigail Montes, the latest member of Los Seis. She's solid. But you got a lot of people out there that are doing like lens-based art. It leaves me cold. It's
Right.
been done before. First of all, it's been done better. We could talk about Lola Alvarez Bravo if you want. I mean, I could. And this is the other problem, that a lot of these people in these spaces, especially the gatekeepers, they don't understand the photographic canon. So they're just like pulling it out of nowhere. They don't understand that, you know, if you're going to be a gatekeeper in photography, you got to understand a little bit of photography. And I see way too many people out, not way too, but enough people out there who are gatekeepers who are putting up like images you have to explain, what this means. And it's like, yo, if the picture don't tell the story, you really need to reevaluate your career choice. I mean, we all take a picture with intent. And as you know, though, once you take that picture, it's out to the world and people react to it different ways. What makes me happy are two things. When people pick up on my vibe that was behind making that picture, that's one thing. But when the more interesting thing is when it awakens something else in them that's specific to them and reinforces their bond to that picture. That happened just yesterday with my dancer's picture. A collector bought a print of it and wrote me this letter, like how it reminded them of their parents when they were mambo dancers back at the freaking Palladium. For me, what that picture represents is something that I realize now looking back on my career in journalism. It's guided my approach to community or neighborhood or local reporting, which is I lived through the fires when I was a kid. I was like 12 at St. Martin at Tours. We all we got. We all we got. Ain't nobody coming on a white horse and save us. Well, we had it like in that neighborhood was a really well organized community, starting with, Astin Jacobo, the legendary, Dominican immigrant who organized the hell out of Crotona. Lucy LaBoy, a Puerto Rican church lady. Um, Father Flynn, the nuns at St. Martin's, and the infrastructure of a community organizing group, the Northwest Bronx Coalition. And I saw these people pull together what they had and their dignity to demand respect. And one of the things that I noticed in those times also is what's going to keep us sane is clinging to our culture, clinging to our traditions. Do not forget who you are, where you came from. Yo, I can't dance to save my life, okay? I happen to take I've happened to take a couple of really good pictures of dancers. But what that represents to me is not the dance. It represents to me the embrace of two dark-skinned people in supposedly a neighborhood that was beyond saving. But look at how homeboy is holding her. There's love there. Love there. They dressed well. You can't tell that the rest of the Bronx is hectic at that moment. But trust me, it was. And that's the point. Why can't we have that? Why must you say that? Like, during the 50th of hip hop, man, me and Ricky, you should have heard some of our conversations. We got tired of people romanticizing that era. It's like, y'all never dealt with a stick-up kid, did you? It's like, ain't nothing romantic about that. Ask my boy Aaron, who had to run back to 155 and made the wrong turn at the Fever up Woody Crest. And he learned just how long those blocks are as he tried to get back to Harlem. There's this romanticization of the destruction of our neighborhoods in that period. I mean, this was happening, right, when HIV/AIDS was destroying our communities, when buildings were being burned out. And you want to romanticize, oh, what you saw in Beat Street? Okay, go ahead, but you have to realize, as Ricky once wrote, he wrote this. If I had to do it all again, I really wonder, was it worth it? Because people in the 50th romanticized the hell out of the South Bronx. And in our view, you haven't earned that right. You weren't there. I romanticize it too, but not for the reason you did. I romanticize it because we had no money and we still were able to get something done. That
Right.
was cool. We were broke,
Right.
but we did stuff because we collaborated. And that's the thing, that kind of spirit of collaboration, embracing your culture, embracing some essence of yourself. And that picture does it for me. That picture really, I look back, it's guided my entire journalistic career to show people in their fullness, not just in their need.
Do you when you were documenting the Bronx during this specific period that's talked about, I'm talking about nationwide.
Yeah.
The burning of the Bronx is talked about a lot of times when it comes to gentrification, when it comes to urban renewal,
Yeah.
there's classes on it. When you were documenting this part of the Bronx, this specific era, do you feel like there is often a romanticization of the Bronx in and of itself outside of hip hop? And that do you also feel that people, maybe should take a step back and look at what was really happening?
I mean, there's a new book out by Ben Ashfield that deals with this, and it basically shows how, what we do all along, the landlords torch the buildings, but now but her, their contribution is it's documented by a historian. I mean, this is like black and white. It's like this is what happened.
Right,
Folks got paid, and I know folks got paid too. I mean, I know that folks some priests at St. Athanasius tried reporting it to the cops and the fire department, and City Hall shut it down back in the 70s, yo. I mean, swear to God. Monsignor Neil Connolly over at St. Athanasius. So, I mean, I think there's a romanticization of that. Um, you know, there's a romanticization of the gangs of that era. I remember when I was editing the Lens block, some Italian student pitched me a story about the Chingalings and said, oh, they're like a family. I said, well, I'm not going to run it. Pure and simple. You tell me they're a family, tell it to my cousin who had to walk by those knuckleheads every day on the way to Columbus, and they would talk shit to her about her body. I don't want to have some Italian kid, going for whatever at ICP telling me about these people in the Bronx. You got to avoid that.
right,
I think there's that kind of romanticization. Same, it's the same kind of misunderstanding, by the way, that happens with Appalachia. I'm friends with Roger May, he's at Apple Shop, but he's an accomplished photographer, and he runs this thing called Looking at Appalachia. I met him like 14 years ago. We hit it off. We're still friends to this day. Because you know what? The way he talked about how he was tired of the stereotypes of Appalachia, it's the same thing we complain about as Latins in New York, bro. Same
right,
thing.
right,
And so, he was talking to me, I'm saying, bro, you just changed the place and some of the names. It's the same dynamic. They want to look at us as poor, when actually what we are is survivors who have skills to navigate cultures, to document cultures, document them much better than some of these so-called famous guys.
right.
And the point is to do it. and try to shut out the rest of that stuff. I'm at a point in my life where that's really what I know what I want to do.
Right.
I don't need approval, and I'll work with anybody. I mean, I do collaborate,
Right.
but there are also some institutions out there that are very clear that, I'm not invited, and nor are some of my generation of photographers. Let me put it that way. There are a couple of institutions out there that one would be surprised that they don't have our work.
Right. Right.
They'd also be surprised to learn that they violated my copyright in a couple of cases, but that's
Oh
another.
gosh.
Yeah, I
Yeah.
mean, listen, man, it's like, people got to understand, you violate that copyright, you're going to get an email from Co Rodriguez, okay? That's it.
That's it.
Co's the assassin. He takes care of it without breaking a sweat. You
Right.
deal with me, you don't want to deal with me. I had to
Right.
deal with one museum that way. Luckily, I was in a guitar shop with my kids, so I said, "Yo, you want to get that vintage Strat? Knock yourself out. We got it."
We
Because somebody, rather than just buy the damn print, decided to use it for a dance poster.
Wow.
And I would never license that image for commercial use like that. Never.
Wow.
And this is an institution that's identified with the Puerto Rican community, okay? Not run by Ricans anymore. And by the
Lord
way,
have
they
mercy.
they they ignore Ricky, they ignore me, they ignore Angel. Angel with 2 Pulitzer Prizes in photography. Whatever. The thing is this, you can't waste your time worrying about that.
Right.
You got to do the work.
Right.
And the thing is, you do the work, you get it out there, it connects. We're talking, it connects. And really, for me, the most satisfying thing is a regular person just tells me what that picture means to them. That's really what it's about. It's that simple. We don't have to complicate it with, intersectional analyses of this and that and all this abstract stuff. I think one of the things I see in the Latin art space, Latinx art space, is a lot of analysis, but not enough joy. I see a lot of like cold-blooded analysis or intellectualizing, and then those of us who actually make art are like, what are they talking about? That's not how it works. We don't think about it in those terms. I mean, that's not to say I don't think about my photos. I think a lot about my photos, bro. I look at photos every single day. I still go back into I went to my archives this afternoon. Keeps you on your toes. You never know what you're going to find in there, bro. That's the other thing. As you get older, your eye matures for a lot of different reasons. Go back at your work. Go back at the old work. You'd be surprised what you might find there. You might also be surprised that when you're starting out, you have to keep all the rules and don't break them. Then when you get older, oh, that's a happy mistake, man. I like that. When you get older, you loosen up too, lo viejito. I'm not a viejito yet, but you learn everything's in perspective. So, I'm not going to sweat that. Lee Romero, the chief photographer at the Times, is now painting full time. He taught me that. Accept happy accidents. Accept the fact that something's not perfect. That's a pretty interesting concept.
That is.
Because with digital, everybody wants to look perfect.
Right.
And you can make it look perfect. You can make it look too perfect, unfortunately. Because you got folks that really they need to like hide that HDR panel. It has to be a lock and key, yo.
Yeah. Yeah.
It's like I have never seen a sky look like that, B. Not even when I was smoking herb. It don't look like that.
It don't look like that.
It
Oh
doesn't.
my gosh.
The thing is, learn how to use all that stuff if you want. And again, if you want to like overuse it, I'm not going to tell you not to. Do it. Get it out of your system.
Right.
And that's advice that I got as a writer. Brenda Ueland, Ueland, wrote a book called If You Want to Write.
Right.
And one of her rules for writers is if you want to be sentimental, go ahead, be sentimental. You will eventually write your way past that to what you really need to do. It's okay, knock yourself out. And again, every picture you take doesn't have to be one ready for the world. Back in analog, if you had one out of a roll of 36, that was a good day. That was a very good day. The day I took that Bantus picture, I got 3 good ones that day, bro. That was like, and I met somebody that I wound up dating for a while.
Oh wow.
Wepa, it was a good
That's a
day,
good
man.
day.
That was an Ice Cube level day, man.
That's right. So let me
So I mean,
ask you this.
but this is
Did
the
you
thing. I mean,
Yeah, go ahead.
also, we're laughing. This should be fun too.
Hmm.
This should be enjoyable. If you're not enjoying this, there's something wrong.
Right.
Not with you necessarily, but
In general,
you have to.
of course. Did you ever keep in contact with the subjects in the dancer's photo?
I never was able to find them.
Never able to find them. All right.
The most that I got was from a friend who knew somebody on that block back then. I mean, I'm in that neighborhood all the time anyway. I got a friend who lives right on the corner from there. But and they said he was a Vietnam vet who kept to himself. And they told me where he lived. This I do know. They told me he lived in a particular house, a very particular house. And that's all he knew. In the intervening years, I had two people come up to me and say, "That's my uncle." And they used to go visit him. I said, "Where did he live?" Wrong neighborhood, wrong part of the Bronx.
Wow.
I don't know. My sister thinks he's Cuban. And having spent enough time in Cuba, I'm like, she might have a point. Homeboy does have a Cuban vibe and just the way he looks and dresses, that
Right.
little cap and whatnot.
Right.
And if he's dancing like a fiend, well, they invented that beat down there. So,
They did.
it's like that's like, to the manner born, if you will. I'd like to think he's Cuban, actually. I'm very fond of Cuban music, and I have some very good Cuban friends from the South Bronx, actually.
Right.
But
Right.
I don't know who he is. I've connected with other people that I photographed that day. I photographed a group of four little girls, and one of them reached out to me when it came out, and she was doing okay. Her brother was in another picture of mine that day. The 80s were not kind to that neighborhood, as you know, about Mott Haven. He had to move out. He's a landscaper on the North Fork of Long Island. I'm sure homeboy is chill now.
I'm sure.
And then the blind guitarist that said, "Get del aire." His grandson and I are friends now.
Wow.
We talk on, I mean, he was living in Portchester. He's in Indiana now, but we talk on social regularly.
Wow. 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 Wow.
And his grandfather now is in the Museum of the City of New York because the museum purchased a portfolio of 10 of my prints.
That's amazing.
The first museum in New York City to own my work. Conclude what you will about that.
Yeah. Yeah. We could come to our own conclusions when it comes to representation and lack thereof. You know,
We're engaging in some serious indirecta right now, and that's cool.
that's right.
Don't need to utter those names. We all know who they are. And it's like, y'all made it clear you don't need me, so that's fine. Go with God. I've gotten
Right.
this far without y'all. Be nice, but a lot of things would be nice. And frankly, I got more important things to pay attention to. And really, again, I have to emphasize, I'm at a point now where getting a note from somebody about the work means a lot more to me than anything else, than getting it published or anything else.
Right.
Because it's a friend of mine living in Spain emailed me this morning about that picture I put up yesterday of the dude crossing Boston Road and Southern Boulevard with the blue fog. It reminded him when he found him.
Wow.
We had a deep talk about that, real deep talk about that.
I can imagine.
And this is like, he's good. He's good. He's highly successful. He's happy. He's in Spain, two kids, the whole nine. But, homeboy grew up on Boynton. Things get hectic on Boynton, at least north of the highway, they do, you know.
Yeah.
But, he wrote me this note out of the blue saying what that picture meant to him. And it obviously meant something deep. I'd much rather get that than somebody writing in some critical review about how I represent the intersection of the diaspora and the working class, or whatever the hell they talk about. I mean, I know I'm being glib because, it's like after a while, it's like you get tired of this as a photographer. They just don't understand what we do.
Yeah.
They don't. I mean, they really don't.
Yeah.
I don't say you have to go back and, do the actual analog process. But again, people need to understand what we do, and people also need to understand what we do in a context. We see ourselves in a context in terms of the tradition of photography and contemporary. We see ourselves as part of that. We're not like special guests. We're not like and special guests in small print.
This is our
We're the,
culture. This is us.
this is we're the main act.
That's right.
We're the main act. And we treat it as such. And to do that, and there's another thing I talk about a lot, and this is where I part ways with some of my more academic and critically minded friends. Our work grows from our relationship to the community from the ground up. Period. End of story. Our work surges from the community up because that's where we hang. That's where we go. I don't go to Hunts Point to take pictures. I go to Hunts Point to see, let me see my boy Crashes in over at Wallworks. Let me see if Tats Crew is hanging out so we could just talk some smack for a while. When they go to Barretto Point Park just to chill for a little while. That's what you do. That's what you do. And I think, The ordinariness of life is something we're entitled to. We don't get it. We get to be like somebody, some crusading journalist, compassionate project, or some new academic research paper on whatever. I mean, why do we do this? I mean, unless you get the bug, you don't understand how we feel about this. I think you do.
Mhm.
You know,
I
this
do.
is like once those of us who discover photography, we remember the moment it hit us. To this day, we remember the moment that it hit us.
Right.
And anything you feel that strongly about, yo, that borders on the religious, man. I'm
It's
serious,
true.
it borders on the
You're
spiritual.
100% correct. It's
Because that should inform what we do. If we're photographing our people, we got to do it from a place of love. Frank Espada taught me that. When Frank died, I quoted Yoruba Guzman. Yoruba said, Frank led with his heart. Now, if you give him some lip, he might lead with his right, but that was another deal. But I mean, this is the thing. We are entitled to portray our communities the way we see fit, not to meet some outside curator's expectation of how miserable we are. I'm paraphrasing Frank Espada on that one. But I mean, really, I aspire for us to just document our communities, put it out there without the kind of judgment where people want to say, oh, you poor little guys. Because I grew up, being the little ghetto nerd. You're different. You're special. No, I'm not. No, I'm not. I could fill up, I could fill up a building with cats like me, yo. A lot of them went to Hayes. I'm not gonna lie. I am partial to Hayes. But the thing is that, I think I'm gonna keep doing this. I know what I want to do. I'm very lucky at a point in my life where I know what I want to do for Shuli. And I'm getting it accomplished slowly. I'm doing it on my terms. I'm not, just keep my head low and doing it. Ricky's doing the same thing. And listen, we're not fools. We know what we got. We know what we got. And, we'll work with people. I've been talking with two artists, pretty accomplished, and they want to collaborate. I'm like, you say when, we'll do it. Because I will. If the project's right, I'm down. But Ricky, me, and those cats, we don't really get invited to a lot of reindeer games, if you know what I mean.
Yeah.
And it's cool. It's cool. I get it. I get it. We were raised a certain way. When you were raised the way we were raised and saw what we saw, we're not going to hold back to spare your feelings. It ain't that kind of party.
That's right. And it
And if
shouldn't
you
be
get
either.
and if you get foolish with us, we're going to have to call you out. But ultimately, you could spend all day doing that. And that's not my job, man.
That's right.
It's not my job. I have two jobs:
Right.
my photography and my kids. That's it. That's it. And my dogs. That's it. I think, we're in an interesting period now. Also, we're inundated with photographs, and smart people can't tell AI photographs. That worries me. When people who are smart, I saw somebody online an hour ago, like, that's as hell. And this is somebody who has, intelligent person. And they just report. I'm like, yo, dude, that never happened. I think it's much more important to get back to the essentials of photography, which is, the image, the composition, and the subject, and the story.
Right.
Those are all important. And don't obscure it with too many bells and whistles. That's my own particular point of view. Your mileage may vary, but my point of view is I like to kind of keep it simple. I don't even like, I don't need to write words about my pictures. I mean, I'm not Dwayne Michaels. Dwayne does that well, but that's Dwayne. I don't need to write long captions to explain the meaning of this. I don't need somebody with a PhD to explain what this picture means. I want the doña to understand what the picture means. I want I want the dude who just comes to fix something. I want my friends. I want people to understand the work. That's it. I don't need anybody to explain it. If I did my right, if I did my job right, the explanation's already in their heart. And that's where it has to hit first, by the way, not the head,
The
the
heart.
heart. That's why photography I love, and that's why my writing was good, because I trained my eye to look for that detail that could move you a bit. That all came from being a photographer, yo. Even though I spent 16 years without shooting, bro. From 83 to 98, 15 years. Not shooting, catching up now. But when I wasn't shooting, I was writing. When I was writing, my eye led my reporting, and it was obvious in my writing that the stuff was visual. So, it all comes in. It all comes in good. It all comes in good.
Well, David, thank you so much. I really appreciate your wealth of knowledge and especially your time. Any final words you want to give to aspiring photographers out there if they're
Yeah.
watching this?
Several things. Look at as much photography as you can. Get familiar with the canon. Even if it's people that you don't like, you got to know who they are. You got to know. I'm not saying you got to go all the way back to the mid 1800s, although, it's a worthwhile starting point. But definitely you got to get into the 20th century, yo. There's a bunch of people at the turn of the century that just changed the game forever, for better or worse. And you got to know who they are. Because if you're going to know what you are and who you are and what you want to say, kind of helps to know who said something before you and how they said it. And the thing is this, it's so much easier now to look at photography than it was in my day. My day, we had to buy a book or go to a museum or a gallery. Now you could sit on your phone and get several excellent websites, including we still got the stuff archived on Lensblog, and you can learn a lot about photography. That's one thing. The other thing is to try to shoot every day. I learned that from Kwaku Alston, who's a very much in demand African American commercial photographer. I mean, he shoots like Vanity Fair covers, Vogue, the big stuff. And he told me that, you know, he got to the point where he got tired of taking pictures because it was a job. And what he would do is after any big assignment where he'd have like a crew in a studio, he'd go back to his crib, take out one camera, one lens, and walk around. Take one picture for yourself every day if you can. It's a good habit. I kind of like have forced myself to do it because people expect me to post twice a day on Insta. So, get into that habit of posting regularly. Now, with that said, likes are like monopoly money. Good luck buying anything with it. Don't base how you feel about the work on likes. Base it on some informed opinion by somebody who might know what they're talking about. That's important. But and also get out, experiment, learn the rules, if only to break them. All this stuff comes in handy. And ultimately, what you're on is a journey of self-discovery. You're going to find out who you are by doing this because you will inform your work the way nobody else will. I know this sounds like, we're getting into like, snatch the pebble from my hand, grasshopper stuff, but there is an element of that. If you really believe in this stuff, there's part of your spirit in this, man. There's part of my spirit in the pictures that really matter to me. It's not just a picture. But anyways, that's the advice I would give. And we appreciate you too, man. My boy Ricky was blown away by when you posted about him. I
Thank you,
mean,
man.
I helped him a little bit. I wrote an introduction, but I've been with him the whole time on
Right.
this journey, and it's just beautiful. Ricky has hands down the best document of the South Bronx of that era. Period. Full stop. Nobody comes close, including his mentor Mel Rosenthal. Ricky won't say that, but I'll say it for Ricky.
Well, I think it's about seeing that Puerto Ricans are more than a monolith. They're not a linear group. There's Puerto Ricans in everything. NASA, there's Puerto Ricans
Yeah.
that are doing photography, that are in the arts, and I think it's important that you know people see that and people recognize that and appreciate that. So I appreciate Ricky being happy that I was able to talk about him, but he's been a mentor to me indirectly,
Mm.
same as you,
Mm. We
by
appreciate
seeing
that
your
too.
work. The first time I actually saw you, I don't know if you remember this, it was 10 years ago. It was at ICP. God rest her soul. Nona Faustine was having a show.
Hmm.
She's recently passed away, but
Yeah, 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 yeah,
she had a show there and she had a talk, and
yeah,
you were the moderator there.
yeah,
So I
yeah, yeah.
remember that. And it was a different time in my life. I was doing photography at the time, and now
Right.
I'm doing more podcasting and social media stuff. But the influence remains, right?
It's all good, man. I mean,
Yeah.
it's all good. It's all good.
Mhm. Well, David, thank you so much. I appreciate your time.
And we appreciate you, brother. You take care, all right?
Too. Bye bye.
Bye bye.